He was extension entomologist at Ohio for his whole career in beekeeping. So, and he wrote for my magazine. So we've been together for over 30 years trying to figure out what to do. And we'll pick out a topic, and sometimes it's a how-to, and sometimes it's answering a question. Sometimes you never know what the subject's going to be. Often we don't know what it's going to be when we start, but we get it figured out. And then I do one more kind of a segment of Beekeeping Today, but it's independent of Beekeeping Today, and it's called Bee Books Old and New. And I'm working with the people in Northern Bee Books over in the UK who sell bee books old and new. And we will take one or two of his brand new just published books and do a book review on it. And then we'll take one of the old ones that they sell. And I have a fairly substantial collection of old bee books, so the two mesh pretty well. And he sells them on an Etsy page, I believe it is, or another computer page, but you can get to it on his from his webpage. So that's what I do. I'm doing in my spare time at the moment, and come summer, I hope that's going to change. Tonight, I want to talk about the name of it's Make Your Bees Pay Their Way. And I'm going to bet that I'm looking at 25 people here on this screen alone. I'm going to bet that the people listening to me, at least one or two of you, have had in the not too distant past, somebody in your household say, I thought we were going to make money in this. and then it's time to, okay, I got to start making money on this. And what I want to do tonight is I've watched a lot of people go through this learning curve, and from it just being a hobby to all the way up to just, a full-time business supporting your family and everything in between. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, is how to get to where you want to be. And it's probably not going to be running a bee store with 3 of your kids working with you and one other person helping you during spring season. It may just be honey, but we'll get there. So I'm going to share my screen. Is that right? Okay. Let's hope this works. Can everybody hear me all right? Apparently. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Share. How's that? Okay. Let your bees pay their way. And we'll get started here. I think we'll get started. Here we are. What a lot of us got started as a hobby. We had 2 colonies out back. They always tell you to start with 2 colonies in case something goes wrong with one of them. You got another one to help fix it. So you start as a hobby, and pretty soon it goes from 2 to 10. And the amount of time that you're spending triples from when you only had 2, and then a little bit later it's more time, and you've got 30 or 40, and pretty soon you've got way too many, and you're going to have to make some kind of a decision, because there's only so many hours in a day, and you're using them all, and you're spending more money than you want to spend, and you want to make sure that doesn't continue. So how do you get there? And the 3 questions, anybody beginning a business or a new venture in life, I guess, is where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And that's basically, if you can answer those 3 questions, you're on your way. It's finding the answers to those 3 questions that are often more trouble than not. So the first thing is, where are you now? And this is when you sit down with a pencil and paper and you take a look at, what do I have? Where am I now? What's my stuff? All your bee stuff. And then you take a look at your current job and any other commitments that you have. Are you doing volunteer time that you're going to have to get up? Do you have a part-time job you may have to change? And then there's what I call your honey-do list. And that's the stuff around the house that's got to get done. You've promised to, fix the porch and get the garage door fixed this summer, and all of these things that you're supposed to be doing that aren't getting done because you're too busy taking care of your bees. And then just take a look at your finances. Where are you? Are you going to be able to continue to pay bills, make your mortgage payment, get your kids in school doing the stuff they need to do? And where are you going to get bee bee yards and how you're going to make business commitments. And that's kind of taking a look at what's the market out there for what I want to do. Can I actually sell all the honey that I could probably make if I had enough colonies? Those sorts of questions. And then take a look at your family and the family commitments and the debt that you have and all of the things that aren't the questions we just answered. And so you're going to calculate your financial, your social, your family, and your beekeeping net worth. Where are you now? And you know, I'm not a financial expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to go talk to somebody that knows more about this than I do, and I'm going to get an honest answer from somebody who's looking at it objectively, as opposed to somebody like me who is probably a little more hyped up about getting out of my day job and keeping bees full time. So don't be afraid to step outside the box a little bit and talk to people who know more about doing this than you do. So once you've got it established where you are now, then where do you want to be? And therein lies another series of questions. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of answers. I want to be big enough to quit my day job. I want to be big enough to put my kids through college if they help out summers and things. I want to be big enough to supply all of the customers with my honey that I have. I want to be big enough to be my own boss. I want to be rich. I want to be very rich. All of those things are possible keeping bees. I'm not going to say there's a lot of people that are very rich keeping bees, but there are some. And with the right planning and with the right direction and resources, I think you can be big enough to put your kids through college, big enough to be your own boss. And depending on your definition of rich, you may even get there. So the next question is, okay, where do you want to be and how soon do you need to get there? Is this a 1-year plan? Is this a 5-year plan? You know, what's realistic in terms of all the other things that you just looked at that you're going to need to do, to fix, to invent, to answer those questions? How soon do you need to get there? And is, you know, 5 years is probably not a bad idea. You can always get there faster. But if you try to get there in 2 years and you find out that you stumble and fall and you can't get up again, you've made a mistake. So, you know, plan on 5 and make it in 3 rather than plan on 3 and not making it at all. Once you've got that decided, you got to get everything but the buzz out of those bees. And if you can get that, I'm suggesting that you try and get that and put it in a box too. You have to get at least enough to break even, and by breaking even, I mean breaking even to where you are before you started this adventure. You know, are you in the same place? Do you have the same income? Do you have the same time? Do you have the same family commitments, church and volunteer and all of those things? Are you breaking even with that? And this is where you take a look and you say, yeah, but my bees are pollinating everybody's garden. You don't get any money for that unless you're charging them. So you're not going to consider that. You got to get enough to break even to where you are now or more. And once you see where you are, you can answer that question. So it comes down to, what can you do with a hive of bees, or 10 or 100? However many you're going to want to get to, where you've got now, and you're going to start, you know, trying to make more money with. And of course, what beekeeper doesn't make honey? Well, everybody raised their hand, because some years you don't make honey. Some years you don't make hardly any honey at all. Some years you make a lot of honey. And how predictable is that honey crop going to be if you're putting the future of your business on how much honey can I produce? And can I produce enough every year? If I can't, can I buy it from somebody and resell it? And still, I'm going to go back to the break-even point. Can I still spend that kind of money and not go into debt, not be worse off than I was before I started this whole foolish thing? So honey production is something to look at, but there's some things going on in the world. Some of these numbers here are a little bit dated, but the idea is the same. The 2020 crop was 150 plus million pounds in the US. You had some weird weather in all sorts of different places in the country. You guys had drought and they had too much rain up north and you know, all of the things that went wrong. In 1980, we had 4.2 million colonies. In 1990, we had 3 million colonies. We got about 2.8 million today, minus some percent that didn't make it through the winter. And this country needs essentially 2 million for almonds. So looking at those kind of numbers on a honey market, is the honey that I'm going to produce going to be able to sell for? And if you take a look at prices, one of the things to notice there, costs about $375 to replace a lost colony. That's a lost colony. That's not just dead bees. But if that colony is lost, stolen, burned, whatever, that's what it's going to cost. The U.S. production average last 30 years was 192 million pounds. Last 10 years, 172 million pounds. Last 3 years, 154 million pounds. You see a trend here? And are we consuming less honey? No. We're consuming more honey every year, but we're producing less of it ourselves. And of course, the reason is imports. And it's tough to compete with 94 cent a pound honey from India. That's what you're going to be doing. Know where your problem's going to be. Know where your competition's going to be. In 1980, 50 million pounds. In 2017, 596 million pounds. And of course, you know who the players are, India and not China anymore. And we're going to get to why. Vietnam, Brazil, Canada. Those are the countries that are sending that much honey here. That's your competitor, are those inexpensive imported honey. And is honey going to be a viable market in the future at it was worth about $333 million last year's crop. Is pollination a better business at 19 billion? That's with a B. If I'm going to invest something in beekeeping, am I going to go for $1 million crop or $1 billion crop? And that's one of the things you're going to have to look at. You're competing with foreign labor, a dysfunctional migrant problem, and the crooks in the business, the stuff that's coming in this country that's adulterated, contaminated, what else? There's going to be a change, though, and you can see that down on the bottom. The American Honey Producers and the American Beekeeping Federation started some time ago. Excuse me, I got a frog on my throat tonight. They started some time ago getting some tariffs on the honey coming into this country from some of those countries that I just mentioned. And that's going to change the picture in the next couple of years. I don't know how much. And what will probably happen, I'm making a prediction here, and we'll see if I'm right a couple of years from now. What will probably happen is that import market will change. And what was happening with China was they were sending their honey, and probably still are, I don't know that, they were sending their honey to a country that wasn't paying a tariff, so it could come in really cheap. And I suspect that the countries that are going to be tariffed now are going to start looking at doing the same thing. They're going to start sending their honey to some neighboring country that doesn't have a tariff on the honey and that can sell it cheap in the U.S. And so both countries are going to make a little bit of money, and we're still competing with really inexpensive imported honey. But watch your eye on that. It's going to see who's going to get it, and how much it's going to affect the market, and then what's going to happen after that. Let's see. If you look at basically a beekeeper's income, if you go back to 1950, honey was about 90% of a commercial beekeeper's income. Pollination and some other things, queens and such, was about 10%. By 1980, honey was about 60% of a commercial beekeeper's income, pollination and other running about 40%. And that other is beginning to be bees, selling bees to new beekeepers, selling bees to other beekeepers to replace and to expand their markets. And in 2020, honey is less than 20% of a commercial beekeeper's income. And that's across the board. There's some beekeepers that are making all of their money on pollination and bees, not even bothering with honey. So this is beginning. The market is evolving, and I assume it's going to continue to evolve to less and less honey and more other I call them products. It'd be pollination, bees, supplies like that. And again, I'll ask the question: do you see a trend here? How much money? How much honey? Well, okay. How much money? How much honey per colony do you need to make, or can you make? What's the best? If you had the best year you ever had, how much honey would your colonies make each? And if you figure that out, I got 100 colonies and I can make 200 pounds. That's going to give me this much money. I can sell. Well, I'm not sure what I can sell it for, but I'll have at least this much. On an average year, probably I'm going to make a whole lot less than that. And in a bad year, I'm going to make way far, maybe none, way less than that. And at this year's cost, actually last year's cost, 2021, it takes about 166 pounds of honey per colony to break even in the honey production costs. What does it cost you to produce a pound of honey? Well, there's a question I'll ask everybody here now. What does it cost you to produce a pound of honey? Do you know? That's one of the questions you're going to have to know before you ever start this, because you're going to be looking at how much honey am I going to sell and how much is it going to cost me, so I know how much I'm going to have to sell it for, so I can get back to that break even place if that's where I'm headed. So right now it's about 166 pounds per colony. If I'm in South Dakota in a non-drought year, that's not bad. If I am in northern Wisconsin in a drought year, I'm not going to make any honey at all. I'm going to be feeding all summer long. So, where are you, and what's the probability that you're going to be able to make that break even spot? And you and I both know, all of us know that making honey is a crapshoot. Hence the Las Vegas thing there. Weather and pesticides and varroa and competing neighbors and all of the other things that are out there, a honey crop. And I'll throw one new one in. I got to mention in here elsewhere, climate change. Climate change is making a difference in some places for some people. But take a look down the road 5 years. Where are your bees going to be, and what's going to be next to them that may affect any of these things that we're talking about? And you got to look 5 years. You got agriculture creeping in. You got suburbs creeping in. You've got regular seasonal droughts creeping in. What's going to be in the next 5 years? And that's what you're going to have to be able to predict, hopefully with some success. And one of the problems we're in is land use changes. I mean, let's take a look at that. You see that map in the middle of the screen, and there's a black line. And on that line, within 50 miles of our border, 170 million people live on that line in this country. Out of 330 million, 170 million live on that line. All of the rest of the people in the US live in the middle someplace. 50 plus million, live in the middle someplace. And in the middle someplace, you can see what's happening to land use. You see those, we're becoming more, cities are expanding. And in the last 2 years, cities have really changed in how they're building houses. And did I hear today that California just changed your housing rule in that you can now put up to 4 houses on a lot? I think I heard that. Does that sound correct? If it isn't, I know you're headed in that direction. Maybe that will help some of the land use problems. You'll be able to put more houses on less land, but that's California. That's not Ohio, and that's not Florida, and that's not Chicago or any of these other states. So we are paved in corn and concrete. There's no doubt about it. And that's not going to change a whole lot. If honey is going to be your main crop, here's some things that I consider guiding rules that thou shalt not. And here's one of them. Don't ever blend your honeys to cover high moisture, bad flavor, to change the color, to change the flavor, to add pollen, to cover up overheating problems, or to dilute a varietal content. What comes out of your beehive should be what you're selling. And I know that that's not the case sometimes, and sometimes that's actually, some of these things may actually improve what you're selling, but don't make it the first thing you do. You're going to make this is a crop that it's got your name on it. And what you want to do is be able to point to it and say, yeah, my bees made that. And beekeepers are their own worst enemy. There's no doubt about it. The stuff that we put in beehives, or have been putting in beehives lately, is awful. And the stuff that people put in beehives all over all the rest of the world is even worse in most cases. One of the things that I look at real hard is the wax that our bees are living on, and getting rid of the wax. You see, that's my friend Buzz there, and he's holding a frame up to the sun, and he can't see the sun through it, and that frame is way, 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 way too black. It's got enough stuff in it. Would you eat that wax? I wouldn't. And that's what you're looking at. You're asking your bees to live in something that's such that you wouldn't eat it yourself. So we do things to our bees that we probably shouldn't be doing, or should be doing less of, and certainly taking care of what's inside that beehive is one of them. How big do you want to get? And you've come to that answer already. You've come to this, okay, I'm going to need to have this much honey to sell to stay even, to break even with my lifestyle before. So how big are you going to have to get? And then you start looking at, what machinery am I going to have to get? This is all in your plan. You've decided all of this way before you got to the point where this guy's loading that extractor. So or that uncapper. So if you know how big you're going to get, where are you going to put it? And I'm going to bet that the kitchen isn't going to work anymore. I'm going to bet even the basement isn't going to work anymore. You're going to have to build a building. Or are you going to go the other direction? And I know a lot of people that have done this very successfully. They've stayed small on purpose. They've capitalized, and they've focused on producing the products that they make the greatest return on with the least amount of work. And maybe honey isn't it. Maybe honey is just some of it. And maybe it's wax or products you make with wax, or take your pick. And that's my friend Bob there in the bottom. And that's what he decided to do. He decided to stay small. He doesn't make hardly any of his honey. He makes some, but he lets other beekeepers make it for him. And then he buys the product. His margin's a lot smaller, but his time is a lot smaller. And he can put the time he puts into not pulling and extracting and bottling honey, he can put into making these other products that have a much higher margin than the honey that he was selling does. So it is an alternative that you may want to explore, is not focusing on honey products, but the products you can make from the beehive. Varietal honey. Excuse me. Varietal honey. Making sure this is one kind of honey that you can sell at a premium price. And you're probably, varietal honey is honey. It's derived from primarily a single source of nectar. Technically, it's supposed to be made from at least 51% of that source or more. I personally think it should be almost pure. But here's one thing to consider is, if you're going to say, I'm making basswood honey, or I'm making whatever kind of varietal honey you've got in your neck of the woods, be prepared to prove it, because somebody may say, show me. And then you're going to have to show that 51% of the pollen in that honey, or some other test that proves it's 51% or more, is truly the honey that you say it is. So if you're confident with the fact that if somebody says, show me, you're going to be okay, then go ahead and call this a varietal honey. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but I'll tell you one thing that people don't think about doing nearly enough is naming their honey. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But if you have varietal honey and you call it dandelion honey every year, people are going to come back to you and say, I tried some of that dandelion honey last year. It was delicious. Do you have any more of that? They're going to know what they're looking for, and they're going to be prepared to pay a premium price for it. If they can ask you for a variety and you have it, you can add to the price of that. So it's one thing to keep in mind. Now these are varietal crops that I have here. and I'm going to bet that you don't have very many of them. And you can take a look and see what they are. There's sweet clover, and there's basswood, and there's all of the crops that we have here. Down in the bottom, we have some fall blooming crops that are and know what your bees are collecting, and then be able to, if you can put an empty box at the beginning of the bloom of your varietal crop and take a full box off at the end of bloom, you can be fairly certain with a little bit of checking that you're producing the varietal honey that your bees were visiting. And one of the things that you'll need to be able to do is identify the pollen in that honey. And believe it or not, there are books out there that will show you what the pollen is from the crop that your bees just gathered. So you can check it yourself and then be confident that when you call this a varietal honey, you're correct and not gonna have a problem. There's something called artisan honey, and that's derived from a variety of sources, but that have something in common. And that's like the locality. I live in Medina County, and I could put Medina County honey on my label. It's going to be a mix of all sorts of things, but the people that are buying it are going to know that it's local, where it came from. There's winter honey and fall honey and spring honey and summer honey, similar varieties. I could call it sweet clover honey. I have white and yellow sweet clover blooming here most of the summer. I could call it sweet clover honey. Pick a trait, and that's the name to give your honey. I'm imploring you to not ever again sell a jar of wildflower honey, because no two jars of wildflower honey are the same. Actually, my wildflower honey, I'm sure, is much better than yours. And if you give people a chance, they'd stand up. So wildflower honey can be all over the map. Try and identify your honey. And if it's all over the map in terms of what they made it of, give it a locality name or maybe a use name. And then I'll give you artisan crops. And like I said, same season, simultaneous bloom, same location, simultaneous bloom, different locations, same season, all mixed up, but give it a name. Identify your honey so that when somebody comes to your farm stand, or you're at the farm market, or wherever it is you're selling your honey, they'll be able to ask for the crop, the artisan honey crop that they bought last time because it was so good. And the fall honeys that you're going to make are probably going to be similar every year. My fall honeys are dominated by goldenrod with a little bit of aster mixed in, and I can tell you that people love goldenrod honey in this part of the country, and they're going to come and ask for goldenrod or at least fall honey. And if I had wildflower on that label, they wouldn't know it from Adam. So I'm trying to convince you that selling honey that people aren't able to identify it by the name or by the flavor or by the color. If you can make sure that happens, if that works, you're going to sell more honey, and you're going to sell it for a premium price. And then there's what about uses? And if you can't identify anything else that your honey is, you don't have a location because it's from all over. There are some honeys that are perfect for making barbecue sauce or for baking bread or tea or toast, or what can you use honey for? And that's what you're going to want to do. There's a company out here called Savannah Honey. And that's what they do. They got a barbecue honey, and that's what it says on the label. And they've got a tea honey, strong tea honey. And if I'm in the grocery store looking at 10 jars of honey, and I know that the only thing I'm going to use honey for is to put in my tea in the morning, and I see a jar of honey that says strong tea honey, guess what? So consider that also. What is it? How does it work for? And a vintage year. I'll tell you what I was able to do a few years ago now at our local farm market here in Medina. I sold vintage honey, and it was vintage 2017, I believe. And that's what it said on the label. Vintage 2017 Medina honey, Medina County honey. And somebody came up to my stand, the stand I was at in when the farm market had opened in 2018, first weekend of the season. And they came and they said, do you have any of that 2017 honey that I bought here last year? It's the best honey I have ever eaten. And then what you can do is take a step back and you look underneath the table where all your boxes of honey are sitting. And you say, I got 2 jars of it left. You want them both? You sold 2 jars of honey where you may not have sold any at all. So look at it. Vintage year is a good way to sell honey because it identifies it. It gives people something that they can ask you for again. This is relatively new on the market, infused honey, and you can infuse honey with almost anything. Now, you absolutely have to identify it as infused honey according to the law. You can't just say this is pepper honey. You have to say pepper infused honey. And I'm not sure about state laws. In Ohio, I have to say pepper infused honey, but you can see all of the things that you can infuse honey with there. There's some people in New York City that are using the hottest peppers that they can find, and they're putting them in whole in their honey pails, and then sitting back and waiting until that honey is so hot that the pail begins to melt. No, I'm kidding, and they're making a fortune. People love this pepper infused honey, but you can use, citrus peels, any of the spices, cinnamon, anything. Just make sure you identify it as cinnamon infused honey. You're not calling it pure honey. You're calling it cinnamon infused honey, because that's what it is. And and then you can go steps further. You can say 2022 pepper infused honey, because the stuff that you make, the stuff that you put your pepper in 2022 may be different than the stuff you put your peppers in the next season. So you're going to want to identify it at 2 levels, that it's pepper infused and that it was produced in 2022, so that people can identify it. And you can tell the difference, and they can tell the difference. And that's just where it goes. It just makes a whole lot of sense, and it sells well. And it's a premium crop. Speaking of selling well, the first question I'll ask is how much does it cost you to make a pound of honey? All of you that know exactly how much it costs you to make a pound of honey, raise your hand. Well, I can't see you, so I don't know, but I'm going to bet a good share of you don't know what it costs to make a pound of honey. I'm also going to bet that many of you, not all of you, but many of you are selling your honey for one of 2 prices: what the market will bear, how much can I charge and still sell it, or what's everybody else selling it for, I can go a dime cheaper. Way too much honey is sold for that dime cheaper price because they want to be able to move their crop. And if that's what you want to do, then know that how much that pound of honey costs you to make, the jar, the label, the driving to the farm market, the all summer work, the harvest, and all of the things. How much did it cost you to produce that pound of honey, and how much can you get for it? So look hard at marketing and pricing and labeling, and know that you're not you're not giving your money away. And there's the farm market people in the Medina, the city of Medina has 2 farm markets on either end of the city, and there's beekeepers in both of them. And the beekeepers in one tend toward the dime less, and the beekeepers in the other one tend toward being able to sell vintage year honey or one of these more prime priced products. And that's the market that they have. And they know that's what the market they have, and they can sell it for $1 more a pound or $2 more a pound than the people in the other farm market. People in the other farm market, I bought 2 cases, I don't want to take any home, or whatever it is, but that's how they're moving it. So what are you going to sell your honey for? Know your costs and know your market, and at least you'll have a feel for what the people that are buying your honey are looking for. If you put a $15 a pound price on your honey at the farm market, and you come with 3 cases and go home with 3 cases, you're in the wrong market. Not that your honey isn't worth $15 a pound. So what you got to do is find that $15 a pound market. I'll say it again. Don't sell wildflower honey. Please, please, please don't sell wildflower honey. You can see the store here. This is a store that I passed in Wisconsin some time ago. Hometown local honey. Sell local honey, sell US honey, varietal honey, location or useful honey, infused honey, vintage, seasonal, or your honey. Put your name on it. Why not sell your honey? Because people know who you are. People know, Flottum's Medina County honey. That's everything that people need to know about what's in that bottle, and they can come back and ask for it again. So do me a favor and don't sell wildflower honey anymore, okay? Well, the other way people make money, another way that people make money with their bees is pollination, and your part of the world certainly dominates that when compared to my part of the world. But if you're not doing it now, or you happen to be keeping bees in my part of the world, these are some of the things you're going to have to look at. Do you have a place to stage and store your bees? What about pesticides? Are you going to be a small or a medium or a semi-truck sized business? What crops are you going to pollinate? What crops grow where you can get your bees to? And the travel and the time and all of the rest of the things that are involved in pollination. Do you have what kind of insurance changes are you going to have to make? And can you do this with 2 or 3 or 4 other beekeepers and share loads rather than take it all on yourself? And those are the questions that you need to answer. Those are some of the questions you need to answer. We'll get to more in a second here, but that's where you start. That's where I would start is, can I answer all of these questions? Do I know the answer, and do I know the cost of what all of these things are going to be? Because that's what you got to do. You got to be able to know the cost so you know what to charge. Here's a picture, and I think we've seen this. In 1950, honey was about 90% of a commercial beekeeper's income. 1980, 60%. 2020, about 20%. I'll ask you again, do you see a trend here? And I don't expect that trend to change a whole lot, even with the tariffs coming in on cheap imported honey. I think honey is going to become less of a percent of beekeepers' business than pollination and selling bees to other beekeepers. So if you're going to decide that you're going to want to pollinate, here's some questions to ask yourself. Are you a good enough beekeeper? Can you keep your bees alive over winter? Because I'm going to need them the first week in April. And I can't split them in time before that to make up a pollination unit. Do you have enough money for this? You're going to have to buy more bees, different kinds of equipment, different kinds of insurance. What if you lose half of your colonies in the winter? And you're planning on renting 150 colonies, and suddenly you got 75, and you can see what that's going to do to your income this year. Can you make it up? Can you get different bees? And those are the kinds of questions you're going to have to answer. Plan for the worst and hope for the best, but plan for the worst, because if you plan for the worst and it happens, you've planned for the worst. You're going to make it through it. Can you make the schedules needed? If you're keeping I said some of these things about getting to where you want to be, maybe plan for 5 years and hope for 3. If your plan is for 5 years, during those 5 years, you're keeping some sort of other job or have some sort of other responsibility, is being a pollinator. The times you're going to have to spend being a pollinator going to work with the schedule you got on that other job or your other responsibility. And can you find somebody? The best friend you'll ever have is a guy who comes over at 12 o'clock on Friday night and helps you move bees. And how many of those people do you know? And know that you're going to have to find some of those. And are you going to have to pay them? If that guy comes over at midnight on Friday and works until 4 a.m. moving bees 50 miles down the road, are you going to have to pay him? Like I said, he'll be your friend once, maybe not the second time. And wherein does the liability and workman's how does the liability work when you've got a friend working for you and you drop a colony on his foot and suddenly he can't walk, and all of those things? Have those questions answered before you ever pick up a colony, before you ever talk to a grower, so that you know what your costs are going to be and what you're going to have to charge to make a living doing this. I spent my undergraduate school learning how to grow plants, how to grow fruit, and how to grow vegetables. And I can talk to any apple grower, any vegetable grower about their crop. I couldn't talk to an almond grower. I don't know anything about almonds, but I could talk to every crop that grows here in Ohio or that grew in Wisconsin. I could talk to them, and I knew as much or more about that crop than that grower did. So I can ask all the right questions. When does it bloom? How many colonies do you need per acre? What are your pests and predators that I need to be aware of, because you're going to be spraying for them? When are you going to spray it for them? I know you've got the almond thing out there with fungicides and tank mixes that cause problems that it took a while to figure out. And that's what you need to know. Is there something going on that you don't know about now? Is irrigation going to be necessary? And if it is, are you going to have irrigation pipes going across all the roads you're going to need to get in and out of? Is that going to be a problem? And how many days are these things going to bloom on average? You know, in a cold year, it's going to take a week longer. On a warm year, it's going to take a week less. So you're going to have to know all the answers to these questions before you commit one colony to this job. And therein, that's what you need to know. Know all of the answers to these questions. And then you're going to spell them out in a pollination contract. And shaking hands is not a good pollination contract. It's acceptable in some cases, I think maybe once in a while, rarely, but it's not a good pollination contract. And it's not a good pollination contract because only you and the person that you're shaking hands with know what you're going to be doing. And if suddenly that person is out of the picture, what do you do now? And what you want to do is you want to write all of this stuff down. And even if you don't put all of it in a pollination contract that the other person signs, at least you'll have written it down and gone over it with. And that's a good way to explain to the person, if you've been pollinating with somebody for a bunch of years, or you're pollinating with someone you've known for a bunch of years and you're going to start pollinating now, and they start looking at all of these what ifs in a pollination contract, they're going to, well, don't you trust me? I mean, haven't we been friends for 50 years? You've been doing this for, and it's not that. It's not that you don't trust them. It's to make sure that both sides understand the things that could go wrong and what happens if. And some of the things that could go wrong are things that you do. Some of the things that are going to go wrong, the grower is going to do, and some things neither of you are going to do that are going to affect either or both of you. So here's some things to write down. And I got a bunch of them. You know, who's participating, and how do I get a hold of you? How many colonies are we talking about? What's the quality and the delivery date? And by quality, it's the 8 frames of bees and brood, or 6 frames, or 12 frames, whatever it is. But at least it's written down. How much you're going to charge? We're going to get to that in a minute. And you're going to charge less for colonies that are smaller than the standard. You're going to get paid more for colonies that exceed the standard. Write it down. It's just so people understand. When do you get paid? Do you get paid some up front? Do you get paid everything when you're done? Do you get paid 6 months ahead of time so that you've got money to work with during the winter? Do you get paid the day you pick up the colonies and take them out of the orchard? As long as both sides know, there won't be a discussion if you come to get them, because you come to get your bees right at the end of blossom, and he wants them there for 1 more or 2 more days because there's still a little bit of blossom there. If you've decided, I'm going to leave them here 20 days or whatever, then you can leave, and you're not cheating him out of a thing. Where are you going to put them? And can you get there? Can you bring them in and let him move them? Often that's the case. You bring them in on pallets, you set them down in a loading zone, and he'll pick them up and put them where he wants them. And then he will bring them back and put them there when he's done with them, so that you can get in there, and that takes some of the load off from you. Here in Ohio, we grow a boatload of pickles every year. And we grow a lot of varieties, and almost all of the varieties we go, you plant, you wait 60 days, and then you harvest, and you replant, and you wait 60 days, and you harvest. And you may get 3 crops out of that. They're insanely uniform in size and shape. And you have to bring the bees in exactly when they, like 2 days before they begin to bloom, or the day they begin to bloom, whatever you and the grower decide. And when that almost last flower falls off, you're picking them up and you're moving them down the road 50 yards or 100 yards or 200 yards to his next crop. And because he's harvesting crops every 2 weeks or every week. He plants one, he waits 2 weeks, plants another one. So he's harvesting almost all summer long. And you got to have your bees pollinating almost all summer long. Can your bees do that? A, can they live on pickle flower, cucumber flower, nectar, and pollen all summer? And or can you make better money somewhere else? And ask all of those questions. So you may be, and then another question for that pickle grower is, you're going to pay me every time I pick them up and move them and put them down on another crop. This isn't an all summer job for one payment. Or I'm going to pollinate 8 crops and you're going to pay me this much as one pollination, but it's going to be 8 times what you would pay for one. So know going in that you may be pollinating more than one crop, not so far away that he can't pick them up and move them for you. Other contract points on pollination contract, the delivery date or percent of bloom, what minimum notice, and that's where you need to know more about your crop than your grower does. And when do you have to get them out, the date or percent bloom, can you move them? What about conflicting dates? Suddenly the apple crop is late, and I've got a date with a blueberry crop, and the apple crop's running along, and the blueberry crop is starting to bloom right on time, and I've got bees and apples, and I got to get bees to blueberries. What do I do? Can I do this? What can I do? What will the blueberry grower accept, and what will the apple grower accept? And maybe you don't want to put yourself in that position. What kind of pesticides are they using? Either, any of the growers are going to be using pesticides. The mortal sin, of course, is spraying flowers when they're in bloom and bees are visiting. But from a grower's perspective, if I don't spray, I don't have a crop. So make sure that both of you understand the ramifications of that. And then we talked about a second crop. What if you don't have any bees? They all died. Varroa got them, bear got them, whatever. I don't have any bees. Can I take this contract and give it to another beekeeper? Or at least introduce you to another beekeeper so that you two can work out the requirements of the pollination job you want to do. And then again, I'll ask you about insurance. Now here's a real world situation. When I was pollinating apples, the orchard was last year next to a field. This year it's next to a neighborhood. They put one up, and people living in the neighborhood right across the road from the apple orchard were getting harassed by the bees that were pollinating the apples. If somebody gets stung and there's a serious medical issue, who's at fault? You, the homeowner, the farmer? Make sure you understand that before you set one colony down so that you don't get caught in the middle of something that will cost you way more than you want to have to pay. And then we talked about legal damages during a contract. If the farmer sprays your bees and kills a lot of them, is there some liability on his part for that? What if you put bees down and you come back in 3 days to check them and half of them are gone because they were too close to the road and somebody was able to steal them? Who pays? Does the farmer pay for those lost colonies? Do you have insurance for those lost colonies? How do you work that out? Just know that may happen, and that settle the problem before it happens rather than argue about it later. And payment resolution, we mentioned the standard strength, let's say 8 frames of bees and brood. If you bring in everything you bring in, or most of what you bring in is 6 frames of bees and brood, how can you, do you have a provision in your contract that'll address that? And know that you need to, and can you get at them all of the time? Can you go get there at 4 in the morning and check your bees before you have to go to work? I have a good friend who has a bolt cutter underneath the front seat of his truck, and he says it's the universal orchard key. And he will get into an orchard because he has to be there to check those bees today, because he knows he's not going to get back there for 3 more days. And therein lies the issue that you need to have worked out before you need that bolt cutter. Penalties of if either fail to perform, the grower doesn't do what he's supposed to do, or you don't do what you're supposed to do. Things are spelled out so that what if? And that's the questions you have to ask. What if? What about acts of God? A tornado goes through the orchard, destroys 2/3 of his trees and all of your bees. Who's it? Is there somebody at fault here? And that's one of the things that you're going to ask the grower about. And if you can't decide, where do you go for arbitration? Do you both know an attorney? Is there another grower? Is there another beekeeper? Is there somebody that both of you can trust and go to and have that settled before you move your bees in? What happens if the grower dies during bloom? Most times, orchards are owned by a corporation that the grower will set up, but not always. Sometimes it's just my 5 acres of land, and I planted apple trees on it, and I harvest apples and I sell them every fall. What if you got bees in there and that grower passes away, and suddenly the law says you can't take those up because we haven't settled the estate yet, and everything that's on this land needs to be determined. And you bees need to sit in that orchard all summer or some portion of the summer. That I know has happened to beekeepers in the past. So know what, excuse me, know what could happen if unfortunately your good friend, the grower, decides to leave and you haven't decided how this is going to work. Let me repeat, a contract should specify that the responsibility for the colony while pollinating is solely the grower's, not yours. Once you set that colony down and he accepts them as being strong enough and in the right place, the physical situation of those colonies is on his plate, not yours. You have no control of what can happen in that orchard because you're 20 or 50 or 100 miles away. So make sure that everybody understands that if somebody steals them, if somebody destroys them, if they do something bad, it's the grower who has to answer that question. And then I got one final point. When do you get paid? And how much do you charge? Well, you should know your costs. If you know how much it costs you to make, if you're good enough to figure out how much it costs you to make a pound of honey, you're good enough to figure out how much it costs you to get a colony to operating strength to put on a truck and take to an orchard. Well, you should be anyway. And here's things to consider. Be realistic about the time, the medications, the feeding, the replacement bee costs, travel during the season, everything that you put into those colonies. How much did it cost you to take those colonies out of winter and get them in shape to be ready to go to the orchard? Now you've got some investment from last season, that you did all summer, and winter you kept them alive, and then spring you got them into shape. How much did that cost? And divided by the 50 colonies that and that's going to be your cost per colony. That's what it costs you to get them into that shape. Then you put them on a truck and you drive 50 miles to the orchard, and then you go there 2 or 3 times during bloom to check them. There's a cost per mile for that. And that's what you should know. What's your cost per mile to drive to that orchard? And how many miles did you draw? So what you've got basically, I rent my colonies for X dollars plus a transport fee for X dollars, cost plus freight. And that is a way to figure this out. Now you can lump that all into one number and you can just say it's $220 a colony. I'll get them here on time. and I'll get them out of here on time, and you'll pay me the day I take them out of here. And that may be all you need to say, but have it written down. But I would strongly suggest that you have these other things at least noted and discussed before. The responsibility for the colony while it's under the care of the grower. But most of us aren't running 100 or 1,000 colonies. Most of us have 2 or maybe 5 or maybe as 10 in the backyard. That's my bee yard about 4 years ago. What do I got there? 1, 2, 3, 7 colonies. I haven't had more than 10 colonies since I've been in Ohio. And it's strictly a matter of function of time. I know how much time I have to take care of my colonies. I know how much care 10 colonies need, and I have that much time or less. So that's what I have, and I've never been a big beekeeper, never will be a big beekeeper. And the way my back is anymore, I'm never going to be a heavy beekeeper either. So then you start looking at, okay, and we talked about the things that you can make with the other products of the beehive. You can be making candles and all of the things that you see here. You may be buying wax from other beekeepers and, take the wax from your 2 or 5 colonies and adding 100 pounds from other beekeepers and going to the farm market and selling all sorts of candles and all sorts of things, pollen, propolis, whatever it is that you can sell that bees make. And it may be that you aren't making nearly as much as you're selling, and your margin's going to be smaller, but your time's going to be a lot less, just like with honey. So, look at it that way. A good way to make a living, if you can do this, if you can get on a ladder and take the side off from a house and remove the bees, maybe you can't put it back together because you don't have the right kind of tools, but at least you can get the bees out of there and somebody else can come in and put it back together for the homeowner. I will tell you one thing is know how to say no when somebody asks you, because you may get in so far over your head that know how to say no, know what you're looking for, be able to size up what an operation is going to cost you in time and money and how much you make per hour. And that's probably what you're going to do is charge the homeowner so much per hour as opposed to so much per job. Because you may get in there and suddenly you find out that I've got a whole nother day's worth of work to do here, and I'm only charging for 1 day, and it's going to take me 2. So, honeybee removal, it is a good business. It can be very profitable, and there aren't a lot of people that do it. So you may find yourself a niche that works really well. I can't pound a nail with a hammer and have it go in straight 3 times out of 5. So I'm not that person, but if you are, then maybe it's something you want to look at. You could go as far as having a store. I bet it might be your garage, but it might be a store that you either rent or a location that you buy. And then you're going to be selling bees and equipment and products you buy and make or produce, seasonal packages, queens you raise or buy. You may be traveling to beekeeper meetings to set up a vendor booth, do demos, classes. You're always, in every one of those locations, you're selling beekeeping. You're convincing people that beekeeping can be done. You can help. You want them to continue keeping bees and to get their friends involved because you need all the customers you're gonna be able to find. And here's some things to think about. Also, is queen production. This isn't something I'd ever get involved in because I'm not nearly that good and I don't have nearly enough bees. But if you're gonna produce queens locally, you're gonna have a market locally. But you gotta have a good product. Are you gonna just raise your own? Are you gonna buy some and resell? And what kind of guarantee? We've got a person here who sells queens that they buy from somebody else, and they have what they call the taillight guarantee. The queen is guaranteed as long as they can see your taillights, and after that, there's no bringing them back dead. They didn't die. Taillight guarantee. You take them out of here for $50-$60, and as long as I can see you when you turn that corner, she's your bug, and that's a way to do it. And in my opinion, that's probably a pretty safe way to do it. If the customer knows going in that if this queen dies, it's my baby. I can't go back and get her fixed. Or you could be selling bees, and you can, nukes or packages, bulk bees. A sustainable business doesn't buy bees, they sell bees, and they're making their own for the most part. And you go back to that percentage of income from commercial beekeepers, what percentage is coming from honey, what percentage is coming from pollination, and what percentage is coming from selling bees to other beekeepers. That last one is growing every year. Every year, people are selling more bees than they did last year. So again, are you gonna guarantee it? And that tail light guarantee goes through again. You put that package in the back of your car, you cover it up with 4 blankets, and it's in the sun all the way home. Those dead bees are yours, not mine. I can't be babysitting you all the way home. You could be selling nukes, and that's what a lot of people are beginning to look at selling now. You can sell overwintered nukes. I can make a nuke last fall, overwinter it, and have it ready to go into a big size colony first thing this spring. I can take my big colonies that overwinter and split them next week. I can sell late spring nukes or late spring splits. I can sell summer splits that we make here the 4th of July. Is real common in my part of Ohio, and the reason for that is I'll make a split in what I call late summer, and then I can do mite treatments, and by fall those splits are essentially mite free, because I don't have a big honey crop and I can afford to treat those splits, and then I can sell them as essentially mite free or at least well treated. You can sell queen cells, you can sell frames of brood, you can sell frames of bees. If anything that you have that bees are dealing with is something that you can sell to a beekeeper that doesn't have one or needs one or wants one. So any of these things are things that you can sell. Know what they cost you, how much time did you put in, how much grief did they give you, how much do you need to make to stay in business to get to that break-even point of where you were before you started this business. You can a lot of people who run businesses also have classes, and they will have queen breeding classes or beginners classes. What they're doing is generating customers. And you can make your class. You can charge for your class, or you can make your class free, and your customers then will know how well you know your job, what you know about bees and beekeeping, and they'll know what kind of equipment you have. And so any way that you do this, you're going to be making money without having to do a whole lot of work, because you already know enough to teach a class to begin with. So you're putting that's the least amount of time. What you're putting time in is dealing with these people on one night a week for 3 months or whatever it is you're going to do. And you can say, take my class and get a discount. And you're going to, that does 2 things. One is they take your class, so they're not a raw beginner who's going to make a lot of mistakes, get mad and quit after a year. They're going to be able to stay in business and stay your customer. And you're still going to sell some of the things in your store that you were going to make money on. So there's a lot of ways to deal with a class and discounts, and you can take advantage of them. You can take care of other people's bees. I have friends in Washington, D.C. and friends in New York City that's how they make their living. They take care of other people's bees. They own the bees, and they will put them in a rich lawyer's backyard or some movie star's backyard, or somebody who's rich who wants to be able to go out on the deck on Friday night with his friends and say, oh, have you seen my bees down there in the garden? And be able to say that they're his bees. You're going to take care of them all summer long. You're going to make sure they stay alive. You're going to harvest their honey. You're going to give their honey back to them so they can give it to their friends. And you're going to charge them for it. And you know how much time and energy they're going to buy the colony. They're going to pay for the boxes and the bees and the equipment that you need to take care of them. So you've got nothing invested in that. All you're invested in is the time that it takes you to take care of other people's bees. And this can be a good way to make money without having to have a lot of bees and without having to have a lot of grief or whatever when if they die, the guy's going to buy it. The thing is, if they die every spring, he's probably not going to keep you around. But if you can keep him alive and he can keep saying, have you seen my bees done in the garden, you're probably going to be able to have a customer like that for a long time. So there we are at the end of this. Get as much of the buzz as you want or as much of the buzz as you can. There's 1,000 ways to let the bees help pay their way. And if you stop and think about it, you can make bees pay their way. And that's the end of it.
Well, thanks a lot, Kim. That was great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop recording.
Speechless. Everybody's speechless.
Where do I-
Well, I do have a